If you've been around AI agents for the last year, you probably heard nonstop about MCP. It was supposed to be the standard, the universal way for AI to talk to different tools. So naturally, a lot of builders started learning it. But recently, something weird is happening. A lot of strong builders have begun moving away from MCP. People from Perplexity, Y Combinator, and even projects like OpenClaw are increasingly favoring a much simpler approach. Just let the model use CLI tools directly. And that creates a very uncomfortable situation. Is MCP already becoming obsolete? Did people just spend time learning something that is absolutely useless? In this video, I want to break down why a lot of builders are shifting towards CLI tools, and what advantage or disadvantage CLI tools have compared to MCP. Let's make one thing very clear. What are CLI tools? CLI stands for Command Line Interface. CLI tools are just programs you run in the terminal. For example, if you want to process audio or video, you use FFmpeg. If you want to edit an image, you use ImageMagick. So when people say let the model use CLI tools directly, they just mean instead of building a custom MCP tool for every action, let the model use software that already exists. That's it. And compared to MCP, CLI tools definitely have some advantages. 1. Lower token costs, and 2. Higher execution efficiency. Let me expand on the first point with a real example. Say you're building an agent that needs to work with GitHub. If you do this with MCP, you might use the GitHub MCP server, but that server exposes over 40 tools. Before the model even starts doing anything, it may already have to work with a large amount of metadata. And that metadata can look roughly like this. And this is just a slice of it. Now compare that to CLI. If you use CLI, you can just give the model access to a terminal and let it use commands like these. This clearly is a much thinner interface. Instead of loading a huge catalog of GitHub MCP tools, the model can just use a few commands like gh and git. So the difference is simple. With MCP, the model has to work with a lot more tool metadata. With CLI, the interface can be much cleaner and thinner. That's why CLI tools have lower token overhead. Besides lower cost, CLI tools are way more efficient. Let's use the same GitHub example. Say your agent needs to inspect a repo, modify a file, commit the change, and then open the pull request. With MCP, this happens through multiple round trips. The model calls one tool to list the files, get the results back, decides which file to read, calls another tool, get the results back, decides what to change, and then calls another tool to update the file, and finally another one to open the pull request. So even for that one task, the model stays involved at every step. With CLI, the model can just plan the whole workflow once and then let the machine execute it way more directly. For example, it can generate a command chain like this. The key difference is very obvious. With MCP, the model often has to pause after each step and decide again. With CLI, more of the workflow can be collapsed into one executable chain. So that's why CLI tools are way more efficient than MCP. So far, CLI sounds great. Lower token cost, higher efficiency. But MCP still has real advantages. And there are two big ones. Number 1, it's more reliable. And number 2, it's more secure. So first, let me talk about why MCP is more reliable. Using this example, let's say you want to edit a photo called joesphoto.jpg. With CLI, this can be tricky because the apostrophe can break the shell command if it is not handled properly. So a command like this can fail. With MCP, this is much less likely because with MCP, the file name is passed as structured data, not as a part of one fragile shell command. And as you can see, the difference is very simple. CLI is more flexible, but also easier to mess up. MCP is more structured, so it's less likely to fail on formatting details. And secondly, MCP is more secure. Let us use an example to demonstrate this. Let's say the model is trying to delete a subfolder within the output folder. and it accidentally writes something like this. This command would delete the entire output folder and everything inside it, and immediately without asking. So with CLI, this can happen because the model is writing raw shell commands, and it's going to cause a lot of damage. With MCP, this is much less likely because with MCP, the user, you, usually do not give the model open-ended shell access. So instead, you give it one specific tool with a safe boundary. Instead of letting the model write any delete command it wants, you might only expose a tool like this. So that way, even if the model makes a mistake, the damage is much more contained. So again, the difference is simple. With CLI, because of unlimited shell access, the model has a lot of freedom, but if it makes a mistake, the consequence is bad. With MCP, the builder has more control, and you would not have too much of a damage. Okay, that's it. So if you're writing an agent, the choice between CLI and MCP are clear. Using CLI is cheaper, it's more efficient. Using MCP, it's more reliable and more secure. That's it for today's video. If you care about AI builder workflow and deep analysis like this, follow my channel.